Band Life Podcast! You are listening to the Band Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock! Hello, and welcome to the Band Life Podcast.
How are we doing?
I am your host, Pete Stannard, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, the Wizard of Rock himself, Mr. Adam West. How are you today, my friend? I've not seen you in a while. You look bushy as ever.
Bright and bushy. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Pete. Very
Bright
good.
and bushy. Thank you for joining me on this episode 17.
Oh, the sevens.
We've been away for a while, mate, and apologies to our avid listener. We've not actually put anything out since Christmas Eve. And we're now in March. So due to unforeseen things like work and
Life.
health issues, life, liberty, and fruit of the loom. I blame fruit of the loom. Not the fruit of my loins for a change.
Yeah, you want to keep that in your trousers, Pete.
But anyway, episode 17. And we've changed our format a little bit, slightly. Okay, we're going to segment our format now. So we're going to do the overview for you, okay? What we're covering today is how to find the perfect recording studio that meets your budget. Overview of the episode. We're going to start with where to look for your perfect recording studio. Then a segment that Adam really wants to do is who gets a slap. I have a very special person that we're going to slap here on the episode. Then moving on from there, we will go into what to look for when researching a recording studio, then what to expect from a recording studio, then we'll do some music business news, and then to finish off, it's what a recording studio expects from you, which I think is actually really important. So stick around for the end bit, because for you guys as artists, I think that is massively important, because I think it gets forgotten about quite a lot, that this is actually a two-way street. You are working with a recording studio.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you're a generous soul, which I'm sure you are, why not buy Adam and myself a cup of coffee? You could do that at buymeacoffee.com/the Band Life Podcast.
Where to start looking for a recording studio? Let me ask you, Adam, how did you find your recording studio? What was your go-to source?
So at the time, we were practicing in a place called The Den, which would have been in Pontypool somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And that's around the time I met Ty, the former bassist, and he said, I know this recording studio, which is up the road from me. Guy's been doing it a long time. It's called Red Rock Studios.
Nice.
And I said, oh, okay. Now, at the time, we kind of went from this place called The Den, literally across the road to an industrial estate, to a place called The Dragonfly, which then veered off into its own little adventure, which was like a pub venue. And then they were doing recording studios there, and we were practicing there also. And then left the Den because those guys were just like pot smoking all day, man. You had to go up like 4 flights of stairs to try and find anybody to pay anybody to come all the way back there. And it was a nightmare. I'm like, So anyway, we went from the Den to the Dragonfly, which were like a family unit, so a little bit more organised. Because I was going to record there, and Ty was like, well, look, Lyndon's been doing this for quite some years. He's got a lot more experience, since the 80s. I went, all right, then we'll give it a go. So we ended up going to Red Rock, and then that's where we stayed practicing and recording any EPs and albums that we did. So, that's down in Peng and Blackwood. So.
Oh, nice. So it was more of a recommendation sort of thing. Yeah, okay. That's cool.
Before the socials really kicked in.
Before before
Yeah,
the days of Googling. You didn't check out their MySpace page then.
I think Linda might still have a MySpace
It's
page, actually.
Yeah, with his one follower, that's Tom from MySpace.
Tom.
If-
Bless Tom.
Bless Tom, bless him. But I suppose the obvious place is Google, really. I think that's where most people start, like they're searching for their recording studio. But when you do Google, you've got to keep in mind that you've got to be able to Google properly, I suppose, because Google's model is a pay-to-see model. That's why when you go on that first page, it's all adverts. As people who've paid to be on that first page. And the thing you got to keep in mind is that studios generally, if they're running ads at all, they're not consistently running it on Google. They might go from Google to social media ads and things like that. So if you caught at a time when studio's not advertising on Google, they might be just on a different page further down as such. So just because a studio's on that first page doesn't necessarily make it the best studio or the right studio for you. There's the right studio for the artist, if that makes sense. Or it could be more from a perspective of there's the right engineer for that artist, I suppose would be a better way of looking at it. Looking further down, maybe, going, I'm not saying go like hundreds of pages in, because studios tend to kind of flip their advertising from social media to Google and stuff, but purely because of money at the end of the day. And it might be a case of some studios, they just don't advertise with Google at all. And that could be kind of a case of, if you're doing this on a budget, then those studios will be slightly cheaper because marketing is a cost. From a business point of view, if you've got a cost, you've got to put it onto your consumer. That's a basic business practice at the end of the day. So if you're spending money with Google or advertising in general, then your costs have to go up to kind of counter that at some point. The other thing is obviously social media.
There's a lot on there, I've noticed lately. Facebook, an awful lot popping up.
Yeah. And, because it tends to be, you've obviously got a lot more organic reach and things like that. Not so much with Facebook and Instagram, but certainly with things like TikTok, they tend to have a bit more organic reach. But once again, it's a pay-to-view model, certainly with Facebook and Instagram. But you also got to keep in mind is that studio owners, they're not trying to be influencers. You're not going to get studios that have, millions of followers with, millions of likes on their posts. I actually looked at NRG Studios, which is a massive studio in the States. Their posts get like 100 views, something like that. Even if you look at like Abbey Road, look at their social media. A lot of their posts will get like 50 views or something like that, that sort of thing. But the thing that I would look for from social media is reviews, because if a studio's not shouting about their reviews on social media, then you're kind of thinking, well, okay, do they actually have any reviews to start with? If I get a good review here at Greenwave, then I'm putting it on social media, even if it's just a little text message saying, oh, that sounds awesome, thanks, which I tend to get quite a lot of. Then I will literally take a screenshot. I'll obviously take the phone number and stuff out, and I'll generate it into a post.
Yeah, I have seen them. It's handy, I think, because at least people can see that other bands are recognizing what you're doing,
Yeah, because and plus it's nice. It's nice for me. It's nice for the studio at the end of the day, and it gives people an idea that, people come here and they have a good experience. They're not sort of just leaving here going, oh, it sounds great, but that bloke's a bit of a that sort of thing, because otherwise they wouldn't be like, oh, Pete, this sounds great. They wouldn't be saying that. It just, the whole experience then becomes, I think, is massively important, especially for recording, not so much for mixing and mastering, because generally they're not about for that, but for the recording process, I think being comfortable and having a nice space, a nice clean space, we make sure we've got like tea and coffee, we put food on, there's like
food as well.
Pastry, food, the full shebang. You may even get a biscuit if you're lucky.
Okie dokie, matey.
Okie dokie. You know, I mean, if you don't come here for the music, come here for the biscuits.
Yeah, I've actually had to keep off the biscuits lately.
Yeah, no, I've had to keep off the pastries. Going back to the social media stuff, the other thing is how much they're posting about their clients. You know, are they reposting stuff? Are they trying to help them promote their what's been produced, as it were? If they're not, if they don't really have any clients to speak of, it's kind of difficult to do that. Yeah, but you've also got to keep in mind that if I'm doing full stack recording, I can logistically, I can only work with about 10 clients a year for that to work. If we're doing a full album for each of those, there might not be a huge amount, you know, specifically about artists, but if you've got nothing throughout, you know, a year or two, then that could probably be a bit, at least something to be mindful of. It might not be necessarily be a red flag, but it's something to be mindful of. Are they giving like advice about music production, you know, release strategies, the music industry in general, that sort of thing? And is that good advice? Do they know what they're talking about? If they don't, especially on the music production side of things, you know, if they're miking things up incorrectly.
I don't suppose you really know, do you? Unless you're actually you're in there recording, you know.
Yeah. Some things are kind of obvious, you know. And again, I always have this kind of philosophy of there's not necessarily a good or a bad way of doing something. There's just different ways of doing things. Like there's a 1,000 ways that I can record a guitar, for example, or an amp, but there's, you know, very few ways that I can capture the sound that the artist is looking for, if that makes sense. My last bit on the notes was recommendations, which I think we've kind of covered. You know, if you're like yourself, you're in a rehearsal studio, someone's recommended something and you've gone with that. But also at gigs, you know, asking around at gigs, if you're a gigging musician, who have people worked with? What were they like to work with? And did they do any kind of pre-production stuff and all that sort of thing? It's always a good shout to ask. Recommendations, I think, are a really good way of doing things, and so you get an honest kind of point of view.
A lot of it's word of mouth, really, isn't it? It's like gigs. You want a gig, go to the venue and talk to them. But it's not always possible for all of us. See, we can't just.
No, it's not. It's not as simple as that. Who gets a slap?
Who gets a slap?
Who gets a slap? This is
the list is too long.
There is a long list, but I think this is a little bit of an oldish story. We're going to go, I'm going to take you back in time to February. The Grammys.
Last month.
I don't know if you saw this story. Kanye West at the Grammys. Did you see this?
No, I don't watch it.
No? I know you're not really much into the news, as it were. But at the Grammys last month, Kanye and his then wife, Bianca Censori, attended the event. And
Beyonce, you mean?
No, you're thinking of Jay-Z.
What do I know?
That's a whole other rapper, mate.
Okay.
This is Kanye West. Okay. Now Kanye on the, you know Kanye? Yeah. Are you friends? I think you need to have a word with him, mate, if you are. Right.
He's best friends with Trump, I know that.
Yes. Let's not pull on that thread as we will find out. Okay. So Kanye on the red carpet. So you know they do like the red carpet thing. They walk down the red carpet and it's like, oh, who are you wearing? All this sort of crap, right? Kanye, he's wearing black trousers, black t-shirt. Bianca was wearing this long fur coat, right? And it gets to the point where they stop and they're all taking the pictures. Okay. Yeah. And Bianca turns to Kanye and she kind of whispers something to him. And you can see it like he's going, look, you'll be okay. Look, just do it. Don't worry about it. You know, you'll be fine. So she took this coat off to reveal her dress, which was essentially, well, it was like hosiery. It was like tights kind of material.
Right.
So it was essentially, she was there naked. You know, you could literally see everything.
I heard the story actually, all kicking
Yeah,
off.
if you look at this online, they have to blot out that, parts of her body because you can see all of her bits and bobs, shall we say. And she just did not look happy throughout the whole thing. And me personally,
no.
I'm like, if my wife was even a little bit apprehensive, I'll be like, look, if you're not happy, don't do it. At the end of the day, I wouldn't be like, no, go on, you can do it, go on, sort of thing. That's the first, but it doesn't stop there, my friend. Okay, this is where Kanye gets probably multiple slaps from me, anyway. Right, just before the Super Bowl, he put out a tweet saying, and I quote, "Would love to walk around wearing a swastika tee." Right? Then he puts out an advert during the Super Bowl, which is not cheap to do. In this advert, it's him sitting in a dentist's chair with an iPhone, and he told users to go to his website where they can buy his T-shirt, which is basically a white T-shirt with a black swastika on it. And not not the friendly Chinese swastika, the proper schmaltzy, as people on TikTok would say.
Yeah,
because you can't use the word.
Right. Yeah, because I was curious, because obviously the Swatchies, they took
the swastika itself, and they mirrored it, didn't they?
So originally it was kind of like, instead of being what it became, it was almost like turned like 45 degrees, and it was a Hindu symbol that was used for sort of I don't know, it's a good one there, and they basically inverted it.
Yeah.
So and he wanted to do wear the T-shirt with
the schmaltzy version.
Really?
Thankfully, Shopify in their in their clarity on this, they put out a statement saying that this does not engage in authentic commerce practices and violated our terms, and they took it down.
Okay.
So, fair enough. But it gets worse. Kanye was not happy about this, my friend. No. He went on to Twitter and he put, I quote, right? This is his words, not mine. "I love Hitler. Hitler was so fresh. I am a Nazi," all in capitals. So he's shouting,
dude.
"I am a Nazi." He then went on, okay, in an apparent reference to companies that cut ties with him because of this, right? All in capital letters. "I love when Jewish people come to me and say they can't work with me anymore. It's my fave." For that, mister, you get slaps.
I love the sound effect. Yes, more slaps.
More slaps for you, Kanye. I'm sorry, you are officially a dick. I've got no other words for you, mate.
Yeah, that needs a slap. Well done, Pete. Good choice.
Thank you. Next episode will be Adam's choice. I'm going to give you some homework, mate. Screw it. Oh,
I got a long list, mate.
That long list.
I'm going to include my manager on that list.
What to look for when researching a studio? Personally, I think if you get a recommendation from someone, especially like for mixing and mastering, not having a website in the first place, for me, red flag, because you have no idea who you're working with. You have no point of reference at all. If they do, the first place or the first thing I would look for is a portfolio, a body of work that you can listen to. If they don't have that, then it will be my my noise on that one. Quack. Sort of thing. But you've also got to keep in mind, even if they do have a portfolio, did they do the full production of that? Did they record, mix and master it, or did they just record it? Did they just mix it, or did they just master it, or a combination of those three things? Because that's the three basic services that you're looking for at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So if they haven't if they've on their portfolio, if they haven't got anything that's been recorded as such, then they might not have space to be recording. They might just work from mastering or mixing suites and things like that. But they may do what's called in the industry is what's called a mothership model. That's where they do the recording, but they go into other people's studios to record, and then they'll do the mixing mastering from their suites. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly good way of doing things, and from a business model perspective, it's actually quite a good way of doing things because you don't have the costs of owning a recording studio. You've got to be aware that if you are working with someone that has that as a model, then it's worth looking at the studio that they want you to go into, and whether or not, what are their rates. When I price stuff for my clients, I break it down. I'm like, this is how much it is to record, this is how much it is to mix, and this is how much it is to master. You should ask, can you give me an itemized version of your bill? And then you can kind of go, okay, this is what the same rate that studio is charging. Or it might just be a little bit more because it's like, well, this is my time. If we're spending a day in the studio, then I should be paid a day to be there. That can escalate your bill. The other aspect of that, if you're looking at the portfolio itself and you're seeing services that aren't there, be aware that if you want those services, that studio or that engineer might not be able to provide those services.
Well, this is why I like what you do, because you've got the whole sit down with your clients, discuss what you want. Sometimes there is a lot of pressure for bands, like you said, right? We're all piss poor broke. No one's got any money.
Yeah.
Even though we're working, and it's like, look, everybody wants to do the same thing. They wanna record something. They want it affordable. They want it good enough that's actually listenable without it being absolutely awful. So if you can fit most of that criteria as a sound engineer, producer, mixer, and master, or whatever, then great.
With the portfolio is, make sure it sounds how you would want things to sound, there or thereabouts. Also it gives you an expectation of genre. If you're a metal band and you go to a studio, you hear a portfolio and it's all hip hop, can they get a good metal sound? So that's something to be aware of from a portfolio stance on that page. The next thing is do they have any credits? Now,
credits.
Personally, I'm not a big fan of credits. For those who don't know what credits are, there's essentially, you could go onto a website, you go onto a page, and it will just have a list of artists that they've worked with and what album they worked on. I see why studios do it. It's because a lot of artists have a bit of a mindset of such and such a band have worked in this studio. That album's been really successful. If I go there, then I'm going to have the same success. I don't think the two coalesce like that. The two don't necessarily work hand in hand, because a major band, for example, will have a production team behind them. Firstly, you're not going to produce the same album or the same level of album per se, potentially. Secondly, there's also a certain level of the business side of things with marketing and everything else that gets albums over the line, or gets singles or everything else over the line, that becomes a successful entity or a potential product, to put it into business terms. So just because you record in Abbey Road Studio, which I know plenty of artists that have, doesn't mean that you're going to be the next Beatles. I'm a bigger fan of reviews. And I think reviews are much more better because you get a better idea of the experience within that studio. You don't want to work with people that are Kanye Wests, shall we say?
Nice segue, that was.
At the end of the day, you don't want that. It's just why I will not work with Kanye West. At the end of the day. Yeah.
A piss if he contacted you now.
No, I wouldn't. I have my principles. Going back to the reviews anyway.
Yes. Please continue.
You've also got to think how current these reviews are. Right. If you're seeing reviews that are like 10 years old, I wouldn't say that it's particularly a red flag, but it's something to be aware of.
It is hard. Sorry, Pete. I know you're on a mission there. I know it is hard though to get people to leave a review. It's like it's hard to get in it. Just to say, look, guys, we'd appreciate it.
But if someone left a 3-star review or something like that, or even a 1-star review, I would still leave it up there, I think, and I would still be like, okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I would look at that and see how I can address it, because you can always reply to reviews. I know you can on Google. Sorry, but that you feel this way, but this is what I'm going to put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'd love for you to come back and we can resolve it and sort this sort of thing. But it's not something that I've ever come across. So who knows? I'll let you know if I ever get a negative review.
It'd have to be pretty bad if somebody was leaving something that negative.
I've got
it's fair.
Artists, and I've got a few kind of businesses, a few media companies and production companies that I've worked with that have given me reviews and things like that. And thankfully, they've all been 5 stars. So that's because I am the greatest. And extremely modest at the same time. The other point that I've put on here is pictures. If they're recording, if you're doing recording, are there pictures of the space that you could look at? You can just
that's something I look for is the pictures.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that they have to be like massively professionally done and stuff, but if there's something there that gives you an idea of the space itself, or even a picture of the people that work there and that sort of thing, then that should be a little bonus as such for you to just get an idea. But something that we do, or that I do, is that I always invite clients to come in and have a look, especially if they're recording. I invite them to come in and have a look around the studio, and we sit down and we do the pre-production stuff. I try to do that in the studio if we can, mainly so that they get a feel for the studio itself. They get to meet me before we go into recording. I get to meet them, and we get an idea of each other and things like that. But from a safety point of view, I always say to them that if you're not comfortable coming by yourself, bring someone with you. Bring your other half. Bring a family member or something like that, because you have no idea who I am. At the end of the day, there's nothing untoward will happen, but you don't know that. Always be safe. If you're going, just as a note, if you are going to any kind of studio, because you've got to think a recording studio, there's no windows, no one can hear you scream.
It starts to sound really dodgy now, isn't it?
It does.
Greenway Studios, you'll never leave again.
You'll never hear you.
Never hear you scream.
No one will hear you scream. But that's why I always say, if you're going to a studio or even a photography studio, I've heard some stories about photography studios in particular, especially with young girls, things like that. Be safe. Take someone with you. And if you have someone saying, oh no, come by yourself, it'll be fine, you can trust me. It's like the bloke with the panel van with a bag of sweets outside of school, okay? Right? Safety first. Please don't put yourself in a situation you don't want to be in, okay? That's all I'm saying. Okay.
Well said, Pete. Well said.
Thank you. So the next point is, how important is pro audio equipment? Now, you might think that that's a funny question to put, because surely it's really important. Well, I always say that it's a yes and no question. Yes, it's important because you can get you will get a great sound with the great equipment, as long as the engineer uses that equipment properly. If the engineer
do you use your equipment properly?
Doesn't, yes. If I get a new compressor or something like that, I will sit down and I will play with that thing until the knobs fall off before I even before I even use it on a session.
Do you have any knobs on your Marshall amp heads that go up to 11?
No, but this Marshall here, a lot of the knobs have fallen off it because it's been gigged so much. When it comes to pro audio stuff, like I say, it's great to have great equipment, but if the engineers aren't very good at using it, those flaws will be extenuated even more, because these pieces of equipment are so precise. That's not to say that you shouldn't have good equipment.
You need to know how to use it.
I've got some, we've got Neumann mics, we've got AKG top of the range stuff. We've got mics that have cost thousands of pounds, and they are beautiful mics to use. But again, if the mic placement is wrong, it's going to sound like a dog's dinner. They're all maintained every year. They get maintained and everything else.
That's comforting and OP. My mate was a sound engineer, and if he put on live gigs and bands, he'd be like, dude, I'd have to go through all my shit all the time, the leads, because you always find some lead that's knackered. For no apparent reason, it just don't work. So you've got to check this stuff, man.
But the other thing is that, like the In Utero album by Nirvana, which I think is the best Nirvana album, was recorded with the worst equipment. Steve Albini, for the In Utero album, he deliberately used like knackered mics and stuff because he wanted that raw live sound.
I like that.
And he deliberately went down that route because that's what the artist wanted.
And it sounded good, did it?
I think it's the best album they produced because it has that live kind of feel to it. It has that energy to it. Don't get the remastered version. Try to get the original. I've got the original on a pink vinyl, actually.
Dude.
Very rare version of it.
Yeah. I have to change your address now, mate.
It's at home. It's not the studio. The record company hated it. They wanted to redo the whole thing because they wanted another Nevermind, and they got this thing.
Sometimes things are just classic
stuff. So it's not always the best thing to use the greatest equipment in the world. And like I say, there's not really wrong and right. There's just what sounds good. Equipment, it all comes down to what you want at the end of the day, which leads nicely on to how important is musical equipment. So things like guitars and amps and all the rest of it. Again, this is a yes/no question. I always advise my clients to bring their own gear because I want to capture your sound. If you're using my gear, that's not your sound necessarily, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because the amp that I have here doesn't necessarily replicate the amp that you have than the sound that you want. And it's the same with like, VSTs and plugins and stuff like that.
Yeah, big thing.
So I'm a big advocate of physically recording as much as possible. Not to say that, you shouldn't use different amps and different guitars and things like that. And all of my clients are welcome to use whatever equipment we have here, obviously. But I'd like to have the foundation of their sound. They're bringing that in, and then we look how we can blend stuff to enhance it and give it more power where it needs to be, sort of thing. Because
that's a fun
generally, that's what they want. We want more power. If you're a metal band, you want more power. that's generally what I get. So I like it.
Dude.
I just want more power, man. So,
11. Turn it up to 11.
11. Well, 22 by the time you get the 2 amps in there. Okay. Moving on from there is does the studio offer pre-production? I think this is something that's quite unique to me here at Green Wave because we rely heavily on working with clients. Like I understand the fact that I'm working with my clients, and it's not my processes to capture their sound. It's me capturing their sound, and the only way that I can do that is through pre-production. I have to understand what they're going for, what their sound is for that to work. This is why I think pre-production is really important. I think it's one of the most important things that you can do.
Well, why wouldn't you do it anyway, see?
I don't know, but most studios don't. I mean, how often do artists actually sit down with the engineers that they're going to be working with and have a conversation, before the start of the session anyway? Maybe that's just me trying to be a bit of a perfectionist, or my kind of...
I don't think so. I think your setup, but this is what charmed me onto yourself, because I thought, well, okay, so you got someone who's recording, mixing and mastering music for a band. They're not just bringing you in and going, right, what are we doing? What's going on? There's like a whole welcome you in, there's refreshments, there's all sorts, and we'll have a chat. And it's like, man, it's very personal.
And there's a structure to what I do as well for pre-production. I don't just kind of go, okay, let's just kind of hash it out, sort of thing. What I do is I reverse engineer the production. So in the meetings, what we do is we sit down and I start at the end. So the conversation that we have starts with the master. It starts with, how do you want this to sound? And how do you want this? What kind of sonic quality are you looking for this? In every aspect of every element. How do you want the drums to sound? How do you want the guitars to sound? How do you want the bass to sound? How do you want the vocals to sound? Do you want strings? Do you want synths? Do you want all of this other stuff that goes into it? Do you want transitional effects and all this other stuff that goes into it? And then once I've worked out or got an idea of how they want that to sound, I can then go, okay, I need to mix it in this way to achieve that sound. A master isn't a mix. It's an elevated version of the mix. So if I've got an idea of how you want the master to sound, then I know how to mix it to that master. And when I know how to mix it to the master, then I know what techniques I need to use to record to the mix. It all comes down to that pre-production stuff. If I learn what's going on the day, then I'm going to waste time going, okay, so now I'm going to have to reposition all the mics because you want it done in this way. This is why I think pre-production is so massively important, and knowing exactly what sound you're going for and how to achieve that sound, going right from the recording to the mixing and the mastering, is massively important for me anyway. Plus it's great to kind of sit down with clients and have a conversation, and a chat and get to know them a bit better as people. What do you expect, from a recording studio? The first thing I would expect from a recording studio is to, first and foremost, is to capture your sound more than anything else, kind of going back to that from what we were talking about before. What it comes down to is, like I said before, is a lot of engineers are kind of stuck in their own processes. They, especially if they've been doing it a long time, they're like, okay, if I put a mic here, I'm going to capture the sound in this way, so on and so forth. For me, I look at that more like that's the artist adhering to your processes rather than your processes adhering to their sound. Especially if you haven't done any kind of pre-production stuff. That's something to kind of be aware of as an artist, and having a conversation about, well, why are you recording it? In the pre-production, I say, I will record it in this way because you want to achieve this sound. The sound's got to be there at the start. If you don't capture it, you can't mix it.
Why would you not do that anyway? That's what baffles me. It's almost like self-explanatory. You'd have to have that set up, wouldn't you?
You would think so, but
it doesn't happen. I know. Unfortunately,
a lot of people aren't, especially new artists going into the studio. It's kind of
Not
like a rabbit in the headlights sort of thing. They're just like, oh, okay. And a lot of engineers are like, I'm going to put a mic there, whether you like it or not. That's where you're going to end up with, sort of thing. So okay, so. The other thing to think about is obviously budget. Most studios do like a half day or a day rate or something like that. And it's usually like an 8-hour or a 4-hour day or something like that. That's not a model I subscribe to. I don't like it. I don't think it's effective. Let's say you're going to record one song in a day, okay? And you've got this 8-hour day to do it. I can assure you what's going to happen is you get there at 9. By the time you set the drums up and do your sound check for your drums, you're looking at about 11, 11:30, something like that, by the time you've actually settled into it and you've started doing some decent takes.
Yeah.
Pre-lunch, you've recorded your drums, right? Then you go off and have some lunch.
But then everyone's tired then because they've eaten. It's just like...
Exactly. Then you're going to go back and you're going to do your bass guitar. You've done a few takes of that. You're going to do your guitars. Before you know it, it's like 4 o'clock and you haven't even touched your vocals yet.
They always come last, though. That's the thing. See, most people, like as keen as I am to do vocals, I know it's the last thing. And if anything, it's a couple of sessions in, because it's like, well, you get the music then before you start singing to it, right?
Yeah. It's at the end of the day, everyone's tired. That's the focal point of most songs.
Yeah.
Right? And you're expecting that artist to give the best performance they can because you've got 2 hours to do it. A lead vocal, possibly doubles, harmonies, and all the other stuff that goes with it. So I don't work in that way at all because I just don't think you're going to get the best performance. I do it differently. I break it down.
Break it down for us, please.
I break it down. So this is how I do it, right? Even if you were doing one song, this is how I would do it. We'd have one session where we just record drums. And then I tell everyone to go home. Go away. I don't want to see your faces for a while, right? Then what I do is I edit all the drums, get them nice and in time and everything else, because human drummers do not play 100% in time all the time. It's a physical impossibility, okay? So I'll edit that through. And then on a different day, we'll get in and we'll do bass and guitars.
Yeah, pretty standard, right?
Yeah, they do that, but they do it on a separate day because then they'll be fresh. Hopefully they're fresh. Hopefully they haven't gone, oh, okay, I'm in Brighton, I'm going to go and get hammered. They come in, they're fresh. They give, again, bass and guitars. They do a good performance, spot on. Then I send them away and I edit those through, which shouldn't be a lot of edits, just a little notches here and there because they've already played to edited drums.
Yeah, that's true.
So I've cut out a huge amount of editing because if you recorded everything at once, then I'm having to edit the drums and then the drums to the bass to the drums and the guitars to the drums. And the whole thing just becomes, that's 3 times the amount of work that it needs to be.
Well, they're trying to make work a little easier for everybody involved, right? Including yourself.
Yeah, exactly. They'll go away, edit all that through. So when the vocalists come in, they get it's edited, everything's nicely in time, and they can give a much better performance for their vocals in particular. This is the main reason I do it, because vocals, if you're singing to something that's out of time, that then becomes really difficult for the singer to do. If everything's nice and tight and in time, that performance becomes a lot better because you're not thinking about the timing so much. It makes more sense. Plus, the vocalist coming in, they haven't spent the day talking, and everything else. So their register is fresh and everything else. They are fresh to do a performance. And obviously, if they've got people coming in for backing vocals and everything else, that sort of thing, then they're obviously invited to come in as well and do their bits. But all of these things are done on different days. I don't ever do one day of, right, let's do a whole day of just trying to bang out as much as possible, because you're just going to end up with something crap.
I agree. I like your setup, Pete. It's very similar to what Lyndon does, but with some minor differences. Obviously, the differences are the sit down chat stuff, and using different cabs. But it's comforting, at least for anybody listening to the show as a would-be new musician. They can go, I like that. I think it's a great setup. Now I think a lot more places should actually do it. But
moving on from the recording, for the mixing, for example, I have unlimited revisions for mixes. So they'll go away and I'll do like a first mix. And then I've got a bit of software that I use that they can actually write on the timeline itself any amendments they want to make. So if they're like, oh, can you bring the guitars up a bit here, the drums down a bit here or whatever, they can make that actually on the timeline. It saves kind of doing emails of at 1 minute 4 seconds, can you put this?
Well, there's always plenty of that, isn't it? There's 30 seconds and a bit in. Can you just slice something in there?
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have to do that. You'd literally, like on the timeline, you could just leave a note just saying, Pete, can you sort this bit out? That sort of thing.
Interesting.
So, which is quite cool. But with mastering, you get 3 revisions. Now, it's very specific why I do that anyway, because if there's any more than, if there's any more than 3 revisions, there's something wrong with the mix. So If that
okay.
becomes the case, then we go back to the mix and we go, okay, look, something needs to be adjusted in the mix to make this master happen. It's never happened. I've never gone back to a mix. Again, because we've done the pre-production. So you're probably going to be the first. No, my luck. You'll be like, I remember episode 17.
It was me.
It was all me. Yeah, and like I say, I charge a flat rate for that. Mainly so then there's no hidden cost. Because if you do an 8-hour day and you run over, they're going to charge you another half day. Yeah, because a lot of them don't have hourly rates. So if you run an hour after...
It's not just about the money for you, though, is it, from what I can gather? It's all about making sure your client gets good results. And I think in turn, what that does then is it paves the way for more people spreading what it is you're doing. And then they can go, oh, no, it's really different from the other studios. This guy does X, 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 Y, and Z. And it's like, and they're like, wow. It's like, yeah, and he's really fucking nice. Like, you know, and people are like, a lot more people I've spoken to recently seem a lot more interested in people being really nice, as Neil would say. It's true though. But like, just because people are fed up with just being around assholes and people that are not interested. And I think, you know, so okay, so I don't know, you might not get the usual crowd going, oh yeah, they're brilliant, but not telling you the real truth. I would rather be truthful, honest, and nice, and yield good results. And I think you're on a winner there, mate.
That's what I do. I'm all about results, results driven at the end of the day.
Results driven, mate.
And then we obviously make sure that you get the right files for your distribution, depending on what that is. The other thing to kind of think about as well is that I would expect from a recording studio is, can they hit a deadline? If you've got a release date in mind, then you've got to be able to hit that, and it's got to be done with plenty of time. So with Georgia, her first single, I had to give it to her last week because she wanted 6 weeks for release.
Right.
So all of her promotions, because she wants the song for all of her marketing and everything else, she's got a 6-week build up, and then there's the actual release of it. So she needed the song for that, and she likes to get it into the upload kind of period that they have, which is normally about 2 weeks. She does all that 6 weeks before, just to be sure that everything's right. If a studio can't meet their deadlines, then you're going to struggle. And again, this all comes out in pre-production. Like, when do you want to release it? How do you want to release it? What strategies are you using to release it? Because if we can't hit those deadlines, then we're going to struggle at the end of the day. If I've got loads of work going on, you know, that's already booked and we can't hit that deadline, I'm like, sorry, we can't hit that deadline. Do you want to adjust it? What do you want to do? That sort of thing. It's a really good thing to find out before going into the studio. This is why I'm always like, everything's got to work in tandem and hand in hand, and you've got to have that ecosystem. You see, going back to one of our old episodes,
podcast,
the ecosystem thing. This is touching upon that sort of stuff. You got your garden. Anyone that knows that episode, go check it out.
The soil.
Yeah, that's your music and all that sort of stuff.
I like your analogy on that. It was quite a fun one to do. That was.
It was a funny one. Yeah, I like that one. But that's it. And then that's what I would say. That's what you should expect from a recording studio. Do you want some music business news?
Go on in quickly.
Shuffle the paper. Quick bit of music business. Mate. Right. Really quick. Okay. Music business news. I love being right. Okay.
Who doesn't, man? I thought I was the only one.
No, I love being right. As you may or may not remember, if you listen to some previous episodes, when we've talked about AI-generated music, I've always said...
We need to do another show on this, Pete. Man, I tell you, it's got scary, mate.
It's got scary. But I've always said that the industry will deal with AI music through copyright. And they have.
Yes, I've seen the link. And I was like, Pete talking about that.
Yes. So, entirely AI-generated music cannot be copywritten. Ba-ding! Great. Mainly because of the way that the learning engines work. So the learning engines basically pull music, already copywritten music, and use that to generate the music. And because it's already copywritten, you cannot re-copyright it. If you're thinking along the lines of, I'm going to generate loads of music and put it out there and make loads of money, you're not. You can still upload it and all that. So the saturation problem is still going to be a problem.
Yeah, it is, mate.
But you will not make money from it because Spotify, they're so generous. Last segment, we'll go through this really quick, okay, even though it's quite important, is what a recording studio expects from you as an artist, okay? Now, most recording studios will tell you the kind of the basic stuff of restring your guitars, check your amps and all this other stuff. Make sure you don't have any crackly pots and all that other stuff. Replace drum heads and all that sort of stuff. That stuff goes without saying. But I think the most important thing that you can do before you go into a recording studio is to make sure that you have a vision for your music. Know how you want your end record to sound and have a decent way of communicating it to the people that you're working with. Don't have kind of ridiculous things of, I want my guitar to sound more fluffy. That sort of thing. I want my drums to be more blue, man. That sort of thing.
We don't make it easy for you, Pete, do we?
No, they don't. The best way that I do this is through reference tracks.
So demanding we are.
I say have an overall reference track, have reference tracks for your drums, have reference tracks for your guitars, have reference tracks for your bass, have reference tracks for your vocals. Try to have as many reference tracks for each individual element as possible. Also have it for each song. That's each song can be slightly different. You may want a slightly different sound, core overall sound, and then individual reference tracks for each song. It makes a lot of work for me, but I'd much rather get it right first time than get it wrong and go over and over and over and over again.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
That's my one thing. I could bang on about restringing guitars.
Quite relevant because a lot of the time, if you've got a real novices going into a studio, they're like, where do I start and where we begin? What you've done and what you've explained in this video is just gone, listen, this is how we start from beginning to end. So if you want to work with us, this is how we do it. And I think that approach is so much easier because sometimes even for like aging musicians like ourselves, it can be a bit daunting and terrifying because you're like, where do I fucking start? Like, what do we do? And if you've got someone going, right, okay, here's what we do first. You got the drums, you got the bass, you got the guitar. Vocals always last. And we always bring you in when you're fresh. We don't do it all in one day. You're like, amazing, man. Stress levels decreased because everybody thinks, at least I did when we went into a studio, that it all got done in one day. And everyone's like, hey, my part's next. And you're like, no, we haven't got time. Off you go. Come back 2 days later. You're like,
yeah.
Psych myself up for that,
Yeah, and it's one of those things that also if you've only like scheduled a day, and you've only half recorded it, it's like, well, okay, now what are you going to charge for another day? Something that was become a budget of a day has now become a budget of 2 days. So you've now doubled your recording costs. So look at it from a business perspective, which this podcast is all about. You've doubled your costs, and at least like this way, you get a budget from me that is your budget. That's it. If we end up doing another day, then we do another day. It's not going to cost you anymore. And why? I think
our bassist Dean will be happy to hear that. He likes to exactly how you explained everything. It's how he likes to kind of work. Let's get it in within a time frame, and then we have to learn and practice that bits. And it's like, look, come on, because this is a very costly thing to get into, and as you say, nobody's got any money, so why would you want to waste it? Let's, it's sound advice, man.
Yeah, and obviously there's the kind of the obvious one of, well, make sure you're well rehearsed. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And
I enjoyed that one.
We'll
that was
see
very
you for
informative.
episode 18, which we haven't even written yet. So it will be about something music based, or it might just be about what badger did Adam kill to have his beard. Bad Life Podcast!